So now we're ready to frost our cake. For this part, what you're going to need is 2 round cakes, 8 or 9 inch, doesn't really make a difference, and a spreading utensil. I'm going to use a butter knife. A lot of experienced bakers use a frosting spatula, which are longer and they're wider and flatter and make it a lot easier to spread out the frosting. But I don't have one, so a butter knife is going to work good enough for this. So we have 2 cakes already made. After making them, we put them in the freezer for 2 to 3 hours to cool down to room temperature. You don't want to frost your cake when it's still hot and out of the oven because your frosting will melt. But putting them in the freezer for a couple hours also works well because it reduces the amount of crumbs that you're going to end up with in your frosting. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to frost the bottom half of our cake. The bottom, depending on how your cake comes out of the oven, this one's very flat. But if you end up with a very rounded top to your cake, you can always take a bread knife, a serrated bread knife, and cut off the top a little bit to make it flatter. So you don't need to do that for this one, but so first what we're going to do is we're going to put some frosting on our bottom layer. You just want to spread it on there pretty well.
What I was missing all that time.
You don't have to worry about crumbs at this point because, I mean, this is the inside of our cake. No one's going to be looking at it. You don't want to put too much in the middle, just enough to make it stick. So now we're ready to put the top on our cake. You can either have this side facing upwards or downwards. It depends on how flat you want the top of your cake to be. If your top half is very rounded, you might want to cut the top off like I suggested for the bottom half, flip it over and have the flat bottom of the cake facing upwards. This will make your cake very square and flat and great for decorating and writing on. If it's a pretty flat cake, then it doesn't really matter. You can just leave it the way it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the top half of our cake and then we're going to put it on like so. You want to look and make sure that it's centered and not sliding and that all the edges are matching up pretty well. Don't worry about having a gap where the cakes meet because when we frost the edges, that's just going to get filled in. So now we're ready to start frosting our cake. This is going to be the first layer of frosting. It's called the crumb coat. So it's going to be a pretty thin layer of frosting all over your cake, and it's going to keep all of the crumbs in this one, so when you frost it again, you're not going to have all these black specks in your white frosting. So you're going to start out by frosting the sides of your cake first. You're going to take a little dollop of frosting, put it on the edges, a couple. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to spread outwards and down. So it goes down the edge of the cake and around. And then you're just going to continue this going all the way around the cake.
By the help of transportation to knock on windows where my friend no longer live, I had forgotten. And everywhere I go, there's always something to remind me.
So now that we have the sides done, we're going to do the top of our cake. Again, just a thin layer. You don't want to use all of your frosting on this.
Of another place and time, where love that traveled far and found.
So now that you have your crumb coat done, you're going to put it in the fridge for probably like 10-20 minutes just to let it cool down and settle and harden so that when you put the top layer of frosting on, again, you're not going to get all the crumbs in it. Alright, so it's been 20 minutes and we're ready to frost it. So as you can see, it's a lot harder and you can touch it and it's not going to get sticky and it's going to make it a lot easier to frost now. Okay, so now we're basically going to repeat what we just did with the crumb coat. So we're just going to take a little bit of the frosting. We're just going to swoop it down on the sides, spread it around. You can smooth it out later.
You stayed outside till 2, waiting for the light to come back.
Now when you're frosting the sides, you want to use the flat of the knife to do it, and that keeps it more smooth looking versus getting lots of swirls in it.
We didn't talk, I knew, until you asked what I was thinking. Until you asked what I was thinking.
And now we're just going to cross the top. Just the rest of it. Okay. And just spread it around.
Brave men tell the truth.
Alright, so now because we're going to be writing on it and decorating it with our frosting tips, you're going to want it to be pretty smooth, so you can just smooth it with the flat edge of the knife.
Us pencils are analogies and puzzles.
You can just go along the sides, and a lot of time you can just spin as you're going along. That way you can just keep the knife still as you're doing this, and it creates a nice, clean line.